Bonjour! I have a new French lesson for you today, and we're going to be talking all about the French pronouns y and en. And if you really want to practice and master these really difficult French pronouns, you can sign up for my mini course, and you can find out more about that by clicking on the link in the video description below. So here we go, c'est parti. We're going to, as I said, talk about the French pronouns y and en. And I've written here that I'm going to tell you all of the rules for these confusing French pronouns. So why are they confusing? Because we don't really need them in English, and you'll see what I'm talking about. We'll begin with the pronoun y. I'll tell you when to use it, how to use it, give you some examples, and then we'll move right on to the pronoun en, and we'll do the same thing. Okay, so let's go. The pronoun y. Well, like I told you a little while ago, we don't really need this pronoun in English, but in French, you can't get away without it. In fact, you've probably already been using the pronoun y, even if you're a beginner, when you say something like on y va or il y a. Have you ever seen those? And have you ever wondered why the pronoun y is there? Well, let me tell you. Here is how to know when you need to use this pronoun. So the thing is, y is used in a couple of different ways, but usually y refers to a place that has previously been mentioned. Not always. There is another really funny way that you can use the pronoun y. But to begin with, let's talk about y meaning there. T-H-E-R-E, there. Okay, so referring to a place that's already been mentioned. Now, you have to know that y is always going to replace a thing or a place that has been mentioned. We'll talk about the thing in a little while, but y is never used to replace a person. Remember that if you're wanting to say him or her, you're going to need to use an object pronoun, okay? So y usually replaces a prepositional phrase that begins with the preposition of location. So I'll just give you a few examples here. Prepositions like à, or chez, dans, sur, devant, derrière, à côté de. All of those are prepositions of location. So if you have à followed by a person, I'll just repeat this, you're not going to use y to replace that person. If you look back up here at the top, you are going to need an indirect object pronoun, okay, to replace the person. Another important thing, so I've just said that y replaces a preposition plus a place or a thing, but even though de is a preposition, you don't use y with de. We're going to talk about de when we start looking at the pronoun en, okay? So let me give you some examples. Example number 1, are you going to the bank today? So in English, we would just say, no, I'm going tomorrow. But you see how I've put the word there in parentheses. That's the y in French. So in French, you have to say, no, I'm going there tomorrow. And if you leave it out, then it just really sounds funny. It seems like you've started a sentence, then you just not completed it. So in French, tu vas à la banque aujourd'hui? You see how I have that preposition à followed by a place? I can replace all of that that's written in red with the pronoun y. Non, j'y vais demain. And I want you to take close note that the pronoun y comes right before the verb in the present tense. So for all of these examples, I'm going to give you a little note to remind you where to place the pronoun y. And if you've already learned other pronouns in French like le, la, les, lui, leur, then you've already learned the placement for those. The placement for y is exactly the same. Okay, so that's at least a little comforting. You ready for another example? All right. She's not going to the mall. So in English, she's not going. In French, she's not going there. Elle ne va pas au centre commercial. Elle n'y va pas. So au is an a in disguise. Remember that au is just a and le. When they're next to each other, you have to form a contraction. It becomes o. So elle n'y va pas. So you have to note the placement when you have negation in your sentence. All right? Your e is still going to come before the verb but your ne pas go all the way around the pronoun and the verb, kind of like a sandwich, all right? So here's your next example. We're going to the store. Do you want to go? Nous allons au magasin. There we have au again because magasin is a masculine singular word. Tu veux y aller? Now look at this. Tu veux y aller. We have an infinitive in this sentence, the infinitive aller. So when you have an infinitive in this sentence, the y, or any other pronoun, is going to come right before it. And if you think about it, it's logical, right? Tu veux y aller. Why would we put the y in front of aller? Because you want to go there. So remember that the pronouns are always going to be placed in front of the verb that they're directly linked to in context and in meaning. D'accord? Okay, here's another example. He was at Jean's house. Jean. He was there. Okay? Now look at this preposition. Il était chez Jean. Chez is a preposition that we don't have in English, but it means that he was at Jean's place. He was at Jean's house. Even though chez doesn't mean house, it's not a noun, it's a preposition. So, il y était. Now here, there is a person, Jean. And I told you that you're not going to use y to replace people. Now, with chez, since chez means at his house, you're still referring to a location, so you're not saying him, okay? A plus a person, when it means him, needs an indirect object pronoun. But chez plus a person can take y, d'accord? Okay, so back to this. Remember that even when you're using another tense like the imperfect, the pronoun, in this case y, comes right before the verb. Okay, and next example, they waited in front of the restaurant. So we could just say in English, they waited, all right? Ils ont attendu, passé composé, ils ont attendu devant le restaurant. Devant, preposition of location, followed by a place. Ils y ont attendu. So in the passé composé, you have to put your pronoun in front of the helping verb, right? And I'm going to show you in a little while how you can get the lesson notes and have all of this as a handy resource. Let's look at another example before I show you a very strange way to use y. I didn't put the cards on the table, so I didn't put them there. Okay? Je n'ai pas mis les cartes sur la table. Je n'y ai pas mis les cartes. So now we have passé composé. So remember, we put our y in front of the helping verb. Negation, you can't separate a pronoun from the verb that it comes right before. So, je n'y ai pas mis les cartes. Okay? Now, next, as promised, I'm going to show you a really strange way to use the pronoun y, but it's very important because it's used a lot in French. So here we go. Strange things can happen in French, right? Sometimes y can mean it. I just talked to you about y replacing a previously mentioned place. But if you recall, I also mentioned that y can also replace a previously mentioned thing. So the reason that this is confusing is because in English, it, when we say it in English, you're going to think, if you've learned direct object pronouns, you're going to think le, la, or les, all right? But it's all about the preposition that comes before the place or the thing, in this case, a thing. If the preposition a plus a thing, you're going to use the pronoun y. Let me just show you this. So it's always going to be preceded by some form of a. And remember, that can be a, o, a la, o, a-u-x, or a, l apostrophe. D'accord? Let me show you some examples so you know what I'm talking about. When you're thinking about something, like an idea, something like that, you use penser à, all right? When you are thinking about something, you can also use the verb réfléchir, which is also followed by à, all right? Let's just look at those two for a minute. Je pense à ton idée. That means I'm thinking about your idea. So if we want to say I'm thinking about it, since we have the a in front of ton idée, we use y and we say j'y pense. Or réfléchir. Tu réfléchis au problème? We can replace au problème with y. Tu y réfléchis? All right? Now, this next one, I don't know if you know it. Arriver does mean to arrive, but it can also mean when you say something like arriver à, followed by an infinitive, when you manage to do something. That's what arriver à, faire something, like homework. That's what it means. So, il arrive à faire ses devoirs. It means he's managing to get his homework done. All right? So, à faire ses devoirs. Yeah, you can even replace à followed by an infinitive with y. Donc, il y arrive. He's managing, right? He's managing what? Well, to get it done. And that's what the pronoun y is there for. So, s'habituer à something, like living in France. S'habituer means to get used to it, okay? Donc, je m'habitue à vivre en France. À vivre en France can be replaced with the pronoun y. Je m'y habitue. Now, what just happened with that M apostrophe Y? Well, you know, me is a pronoun as well. In this case, it's a reflexive pronoun. And so when you have a pronoun like that in front of the pronoun y, the me becomes M apostrophe. Okay? So, voila, that's what that's doing there. Here we go. Let me show you some more examples. Réussir à means to manage to do something. Okay? Réussir by itself means to succeed. Réussir à plus an infinitive. Je réussis à comprendre ce qu'il me dit means I'm managing to understand what he is saying to me. I can replace à comprendre ce qu'il me dit with y, and all of a sudden I say j'y réussis. S'intéresser à, to be interested in something. So notice that in English, many times you know this, you can't directly translate from English to French. Okay, so in English we say I'm interested in something. And in French, you're interested à something. So you're seeing now how important those ahs are. And in a few minutes, you'll see how important the deux are as well. But look at this. Nous nous intéressons à l'histoire. Now again, this is a reflexive verb. That's s'intéresser is the infinitive. Nous nous intéressons à l'histoire. Okay? So the second nous is a reflexive pronoun. À l'histoire gets replaced with y. Nous nous y intéressons. So again, the y is going to go after the reflexive pronoun. All right, and now when you respond to something, you reply to something, at least this one makes sense because in English we say that we reply to something like an email. Vous répondez à son email. À son email becomes y. Vous y répondez. Okay? So this is just a short list of verbs that are followed by a. Okay? But it's worth writing them down because, as I said, sometimes they just don't correspond to English. All right, so now, are you ready to hear about the pronoun en? And remember that I have this mini course available for you. Okay, if you think, all right, yes, this is great, but I'm going to need some practice, I've got you covered. All right, so now let's look at the pronoun en. Again, we don't really need this pronoun in English. En refers to a noun that is introduced by some form of de. It's also used to refer to a noun that is introduced by un, une, or any other number. And at this point, I'd really like to point out that because a lot of times we think un or une just means a or an, right? But you have to remember that un, deux, trois, un, and une are also numbers, which represent quantities, of course. So, that can be a little confusing sometimes because you might say something like, je vois une pomme. I see an apple. And then we're going to want to say, I see it. You're going to want to maybe use la because pomme is feminine. But that word une that comes before the noun changes everything. Since it's a quantity, you're going to need to use the pronoun en. And there are other times when you use en. With any expressions of quantity, for example, un verre de. You see that de? That's right there. Un kilo de. Une bouteille de. So any expression of quantity is the noun that comes after it is going to be replaced with en. And then you also have expressions of quantity, adverbs of quantity, like beaucoup de, peu de, assez de, etc. All right, so how would you translate this to English? Well, usually it's translated by words like some or any or one. And a lot of times we don't have to say it in English, but you can't avoid it in French. And so you'll see in the examples what I'm talking about. All right, nous voudrions 2 baguettes. So we have a number there. That's a quantity. So the word that comes after it can be replaced by un. We would like 2 baguettes. Okay? In English, we could just say, we would like 2. But in French, you would have to say, we would like 2 of them. Look over on the right. We would like 2 of them. The of them is the pronoun en. Nous en voudrions 2. All right? So it kind of, when we say we would like 2 of them, one of the tricky things is that in English, we would put that at the end of the sentence. But you have to remember that all pronouns come right before the verb in the present tense. All right? And note also that when a number is involved, the number needs to be repeated. All right? Here's another example. Je ne mange pas de frites. Je ne mange pas de frites. I'm not eating any, we could say. That means I'm not eating any fries, but I'm not eating any. Un point c'est tout. That's it in English. In French, I'm not eating any of them, and I know I'm repeating myself, but remember the of them is the en. And here, we're using negation. Je n'en mange pas. You're going to put your ne and your pas around the pronoun and the verb. Turn it into a little sandwich, okay? Note that the form of de that introduces the noun does also get replaced by the pronoun en. Okay, here's the next example. Tu vas servir du champagne? Tu vas servir du champagne. Are you going to serve some? In French, are you going to serve some of that? So of that is the en. Tu vas en servir. Now remember, with the pronoun y, we talked about what happens when you have an infinitive in the sentence. Your pronoun is going to go right in front of the infinitive. And why is that? Because what are you going to do with that champagne? You're going to serve it. All right? So remember, the pronoun comes right before the verb that it's directly linked to in context. And that's the same for any pronoun in French. All right, let me go back to my example that I showed you before, the champagne example. Je ne mange pas de frites. I just meant to mention to you why that says de, de frites instead of des frites. And you might already know why, but in case you don't, it's because du, de la, des, de, L apostrophe, all of those change to de or D apostrophe after negation. Okay, so if you're not familiar with that, you might want to go and have a look at my lesson on all the different ways to use de. All right, next example. Vous achetiez beaucoup de citrons. Now here I just wanted to throw in a different tense, as I did with one of the examples using y. Here I'm using the imperfect tense of acheter. So were you buying a lot of lemons? So the de citrons, that's the part that gets replaced. And so were you buying a lot of them? Vous en achetiez beaucoup. Vous en achetiez beaucoup? It's supposed to be a question. All right, so the en comes right before the verb that it's directly linked to in context and meaning. And note that you do have to repeat the word beaucoup or any other adverb of quantity, but the de gets replaced right along with the noun that follows it. Okay, 2 more examples, and then I'm going to show you a strange way to use en. J'ai bu 8 verres d'eau. 8 verres d'eau. So here we're talking about a quantity. All right, and we're using the passé composé in this one. I drank 8 glasses of water. In English, yeah, I drank 8 glasses. If you just say that in French, people are going to be like, 8 glasses of what? You know, so we have to say I drank 8 glasses of it, and that's my en. And notice where it's placed in the sentence, j'en ai bu 8 verres. So the en comes before the helping verb in the passé composé, and note that you have to repeat the quantity, which in this case is 8, 8, and the expression of quantity, which in this case would be the glasses, les verres, d'accord? Donc, j'en ai bu 8 verres, and il n'a pas voulu de poulet. Remember why it's DE, we're following negation here. Il n'a pas voulu de poulet. He didn't want any chicken, or just he didn't want any. In French, he didn't want any of it, which is the en. Il n'en a pas voulu. Il n'en a pas voulu. So you're going to sandwich that en, a with the ne pas, and that's how you do it in the passé composé with negation. So you remember the strange way that we used the pronoun I, and it meant it. And it doesn't make any sense because we don't do it like that in English. But anyway, you remember that rule. Well, guess what? You can do the same thing with en. Look at this. Sometimes en can also mean it. So that means the pronoun en can also replace a thing. Okay, a thing that has been introduced by a verb and that is preceded by some form of de. And you have many French verbs, like a second ago we were talking about, I just gave you a handful of verbs that are followed by a in French, even though it doesn't always make sense in our English brains. Well, you have a lot of verbs that are also followed by de. Yup. And so that means you get to use the verb, the pronoun en. So look at these examples. Okay, maybe you know some of these little expressions. Avoir peur de. That de is so important. You can't forget it because that's your indicator that you're going to use the pronoun en. And you know what? It's not going to go away because when you get further along in French and you're learning different kinds of pronouns, relative pronouns, the de is also going to be a clue as to when you use don. D-O-N-T. If you're an advanced learner, then you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, then just forget about it for right now, but remember the de. So, avoir peur de quelque chose means to be afraid of something. J'ai peur des serpents. J'ai peur des serpents. So, you see, des serpents can be replaced by en. J'en ai peur. Or to need something. Avoir besoin de quelque chose. Tu as besoin d'argent? Tu en as besoin? So that means, do you need any of it? Right? Up in the first example, j'ai peur des serpents, j'en ai peur. I'm afraid of them. All right, so why is this confusing? I know why it's confusing, because if you've learned direct object pronouns, you've learned that them is les, right? Or them could possibly be leur. But in this case, since we have the de involved, them is the pronoun en. Okay? Okay, I know that there's nothing else I can do but show you examples and give you the rules, and then you've got to take some time to just, wrap your brain around that and practice. I do think e and en and the subjunctive are the hardest things in French, grammar-wise. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it, all right? You just need the rules and the tools. So that's what I'm giving you here. Let me give you some more. Look, we're down on the third example. Avoir envie de quelque chose. Did you know that it means the same thing as the verb vouloir? To want, to desire. So yes, you can use the verb vouloir. He wants to eat a pizza. You could easily say, il veut or il voudrait manger une pizza. D'accord? That's fine. But if you want to take your French to the next level, then you can use this expression. Il a envie de manger une pizza. So, de manger une pizza, all of that gets replaced. Il en a envie. It means he wants to do that. Okay? He wants to do that action of eating the pizza. That's en. In English, we could just say he wants to. Leave it at that. But mais pas en français. Okay. Avoir l'intention de. So to have the intention of doing something. Nous avons l'intention de, plus an infinitive, partir en vacances. So yes, we intend to. We might just say in English, do you intend to go on vacation? Yes, we intend to. In French, nous en avons l'intention. You cannot just say nous avons l'intention. If you just say nous avons l'intention, your French person who's looking at you is going to keep looking at you and wondering when you're going to finish your sentence, even though your English brain has already put the period at the end of the sentence. Mais non, pas en français. All right, just a few more examples. Rêver de faire quelque chose, to dream of doing something. Elle rêve de faire le tour du monde. They're dreaming of taking a tour around the world. D'accord? Elles en rêvent. Se souvenir de faire quelque chose. So just look at the se souvenir de. That means to remember, and it's reflexive. All right? So se souvenir de can be followed by an infinitive. It can also just be followed by a thing or even a person. Look at this. Je me souviens de ce restaurant. I remember this restaurant. Je m'en souviens. There again, reflexive pronoun, me, followed by un. Je m'en souviens. You could say something like, I just mentioned that you can use this with a person. You could say something like, je me souviens de toi. What does that mean? Je me souviens de toi. I remember you. Or, tu te souviens de moi? Do you remember me? Oui, je m'en souviens. Je m'en souviens. And maybe you've learned another reflexive verb, se rappeler de. It also means to remember. You can use it in exactly the same way as se souvenir de. The important thing is the de. So anytime you want to remember something, you're going to have a de involved, which means you can use the pronoun en. Yeah, that's fabulous. All right. Profiter de faire quelque chose. Now we look at this verb profiter and it looks like profit, making money. No, not really. In French, profiter de means to take advantage of something, but not in a negative way. Look at this example. Tu profites de tes vacances. Tu profites de tes vacances means you are taking advantage of enjoying your vacation, right? Tu en profites. And a lot of times you'll hear people say, profites-en, enjoy it. D'accord? And why profites-en? Well, because of the de that's there. Look again at the example. Tu profites de tes vacances. So the reason why a minute ago I said E and en are some of the hardest, at least they were some of the hardest things for me to learn in French, is because they just don't translate to English. Shoot. If it could be just that simple, that would be great. This is my last example. Se servir de quelque chose. Now you see servir and you think to serve, but in this case it's reflexive. Se servir de means to use. So, have you been using the verb utiliser, to use? That's fine. You can keep on using utiliser, but most French people don't use utiliser. Well, that's not true. People use utiliser, but se servir de, even though it's more complicated, much more complicated grammar-wise, is used more frequently, I've found. So when the verb servir becomes reflexive, you stick a de on the end of it, and it means to use. And guess what? Yay, you get to use the pronoun en, as you've been dreaming of doing for so long. Elle se sert de ma voiture. Elle se sert de ma voiture. That just means, it doesn't mean she's serving my car, anything. It means she is using my car. So she's using it. Elle s'en sert. Now, elle s'en sert. If I just said to you, how would you say she's using it? And if you were using the verb utiliser, you might say elle l'utilise. That's an L apostrophe. Elle l'utilise, which is actually la because we're referring to my car, right? And it's feminine and it's singular. But elle se sert de ma voiture. She's using it. If we're using the verb se servir de, elle s'en sert. So remember, that's just the tricky thing I wanted to tell you about y and en, is that they can both mean it as well. So don't be fooled into using an object pronoun. D'accord? So look at this. I do have a complete lesson guide available, and man, this one turned into a 6-pager. It's because there's so much information when we start talking about y and en, and especially at the same time. But if you would like this lesson guide, and especially if you're a supporter of mine on Patreon, then it's super easy. All you have to do is go in and download it for free. If you don't know what Patreon is, you can find the link to that website down in the video description. Patreon is just a way for you to support me in my work. You know, if you want to do that, these lessons do take quite a bit of time to put together. So for my supporters, I like to give some freebies every week. And so this week, that's what it is. It's the 6-page lesson guide. You can also sign up for my mini course, as I mentioned before, and the link to that course is down in the description below. Voila, I hope that this lesson has helped you. And if you really, really, really want to practice and master, in my mini course, there are well, of course, you get the lesson guide with all of the rules that you can print out and just have them ready instead of having to watch the video over and over again. You also get 3 online quizzes. One's in the present, one's in the passé composé, and one is in the future proche, so that you can practice and just see again where all of those pronouns are placed and how they're used. Now, those quizzes are multiple choice, which are sometimes easy. All right, they're not easy if you don't know the rules, but what I've included in the mini course that will really, really help you is a set of 75 practice cards. And you can use, there's no multiple choice. That's why it's not an online quiz, because I wanted to give you a real challenge. And so here's what they look like. I just have a few of them right here. Okay, but there are 75 of them included in the mini course, and you can either cut them out, as I've done here, so that you can flip through them if you like that, if you're a paper kind of person. And if you're not a paper person and you'd rather just watch them, you know, look at them on your device, whatever kind of device you are using, I've also included a form that you can use that way, as well as an answer key. So those 75 cards will really, really help you. Let me know if you have any questions or suggestions for future French lessons. Merci beaucoup et à très bientôt. Ciao.